As you may know by now, I love sharing the stories and meanings behind the wonderful hymns that we have sung down through the years. Today, I want to talk about Amazing Grace. As I was preparing this devotional, I was struck by the thought that many of the greatest hymns have been written as the result of a storm, whether a thunderstorm or a storm at sea or a virtual storm that arises out of adversity. For How Great Thou Art, Karl Boberg wrote his poem that became the hymn after taking shelter from the storm. And when I told the story of It Is Well With My Soul, it was a collision at sea that took the life of his children, and yet Horatio Spafford wrote this beautiful hymn. A terrible storm caused a young Martin Luther to dedicate his life to Christ, later writing the powerful hymn, A Mighty Fortress is Our God. It was also a storm that changed the life of 18th century John Newton, an Englishman whom you might describe at the time as a wretch, as he later called himself. He was a slave trader, the captain of a ship that transported captured Africans to America. On one of those trips across the Atlantic, his ship was in a terrible storm that threatened to take them to the bottom of the sea. Newton, who was an atheist at the time, cried out to God for help, cried out to God to save them. The ship and the crew did survive, and Newton found a book in the ship's library called The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. Although it took several years for Newton to give up his depraved life and his occupation as a slave trader, he eventually gave his life to Christ. He became an Anglican priest, and he was a leader in the English abolitionist movement to abolish slavery. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. 'Twas blind, but now I see. Now, I don't consider myself a wretch, but I do know that my life has been a process of being found by Christ, then falling away from the faith, and then being found again. So this verse does speak to me over and over again. The third verse is especially meaningful to me right now as we weather the storm of the coronavirus. As an octogenarian, I'm well aware that I am one of the folks that are at risk of succumbing to the ravages of this terrible virus. So I sing this verse. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. You know, at our life group last Sunday, we read an interesting version of Psalm 13, kind of interwoven with the 23rd Psalm. Psalm 13 asks, "How long, O Lord?" As we are all weary from the changes in our lives because of the pandemic, aren't we all saying, "How long, O Lord, must we endure this?" I know I am. And how long, O Lord, will we have such racial tensions and violence? How long, O Lord? But the 23rd Psalm answers saying, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." In a similar manner, the fourth verse of Amazing Grace provides that answer. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be as long as life endures. It is that promise of goodness, peace, and grace which sustains me during this period. That grace given by God is so amazing, isn't it? Even Psalm 13 reaches this conclusion in its final 2 verses. It says, "But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me." And Psalm 23 gives us our eternal hope. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And the final verse of Amazing Grace promises that as well. "When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we'd first begun." Amen and amen.